Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first night of our, really what is a book study on Swamiji's wonderful book, Secrets of Emotional Healing. We're going to start tonight, as we will every night, with a prayer, of course, chanting, a very brief meditation, just a few minutes, and then tonight we'll have some music. And then I will stand up and begin by introducing the course and what it will look like for the next year. So let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, our beloved Gurudeva, Paramhansa Yogananda ji, saints of all religions, beloved Swamiji, we lovingly bow before you all. Divine Mother, help us to attune ourselves to your transforming presence. Be with us tonight and throughout this course as we feel our way to turn our emotions, likes and dislikes, into uplifted, expansive, spiritual energy, responding to our true soul call. We want only thee. Help us through these classes to find our way home. Om, peace, Shanti, Amen.
Night and day, I
door of my heart open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Wilt thou come, just for once come to me? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, night and day, I look for thee, night and day, night and day, night and day. I look for thee night and day, night and day, night and day. I look for thee night and day. Door of my heart open wide I keep. Om Shanti. Amen.
What is is love? Is it only ours? Or does love whisper in the flowers? Flowers. Surely we, children of this world, could not love by our own powers. What is joy? Is it just a dream? Or does joy laugh in every stream? Are the clouds mindless after all? Or is joy all nature's theme? God is dead, so men say. Can't they see all life's is play? Not a church binds him as its own. Not a creed makes him fully known. Foolish we, if we limit him. Every atom is his throne. What is love? Is it only ours? Or does love whisper in the flowers? Flowers. Surely we, children of this world, could not love by our own powers. What is love? What is love? Is it love we touch in the flowers?
I've been thinking about this course now since it was proposed to me probably well over a month ago. First with a little bit of trepidation. Excuse me for 1 minute. I gave myself a glass of water, but I left it in the minister's room. Sorry. So at first with a little trepidation, because when Sai Ganesh said to me, why don't you do it? I picked up this little book. I'm sure many of you have seen some of Swami Kriyananda's books. He did a whole series that's called the Secret Series. And what he's done in these books is he's written what he calls 30 secrets. They're little spiritual tips for us on many different topics. This one, of course, is on emotional healing. And for each day of the month, he gives us a secret, how to overcome whatever he's talking about. And he's covered many topics, as I said. In this book, what he does is he goes through and he lists emotions that I had never even thought of as being emotions. But, of course, they are things like loneliness. Of course, there's doubt, there's fear, a fear of being left alone, anger, anxiety. Anyway, if you've seen it or looked at the book, you know. And there's just a line or two after that. And when I first looked at the book, I thought to myself, what am I going to say for a class? What would I say about that? Now I've been sitting with it for a month, And what I realized just today is that what Swamiji has done here is what he's done in so many of his pieces, so many of his works, whether it's a song or a poem, certainly in a book. He's given us enough material, if you will, enough wisdom, enough thoughts to really consider the whole of the spiritual path. It's really quite remarkable. I've thought to myself many times, listening to a song, I was going to say on a Sunday, because so often I'm sitting up here and I'll listen to the choir or some singers sing a song, and I'll think, that is the whole sermon. That is the whole spiritual path. He just had that in him. It's like Master's phrase, center everywhere, circumference nowhere. So much of what came through Swami Kriyananda is a seed that we can grow with into infinity. And it's all right there. And as I was looking, just glancing through the book, because I haven't studied the whole book, that's for sure, in terms of getting ready to speak about it. But just quickly reading through it, today I thought, this is our spiritual path. That's what we'll be doing for, excuse me, however long the course goes on. Slowly but surely, we'll just fill in every aspect of the path, or maybe even each week, a way that we can reach for infinity. It's really what we're doing. How could we fulfill our path as we review each of these secrets for emotional healing? I'd like to back up now. There are so many of you who registered for this class who I don't know, or at least I don't know you by your name. Maybe if I saw you, I would know you. Let me have a drink here. So, you know that I'm Shanti, of course. For those of you who don't know me well, I think probably the intuition even to suggest this class to me came because of my particular background. I've been a physician for many decades, and even that medical path, I'm not going to tell this whole story now, but came to me as an inspiration when I was on what is called Swami's Beach, underneath the Self-Realization Fellowship building in Encinitas, California. I was running there and just in an instant knew that I was going to go to medical school. And I have always attributed that to Master, who is Paramhansa Yogananda, of course. So I've been in medicine all of these years, but really coincidental to that, I was called onto a spiritual path. It was a moment of spiritual awakening. And within a year and a half, I was living in Palo Alto to be able to go to medical school up here. And of course, I instantly became involved with Ananda. Now, there's a story behind all of that, matters very much to me, but only matters to all of you because at each turn, that path was being guided, first by Master and then by Swamiji. And it's just been, it's been not only a joy, but it's been joy. It's been it's like somebody taking my hand and saying, come here, sweetie, we're gonna show you how do you find true joy, true love, true inner peace. And one might think that's impossible, going through an internship and working hundreds of hours every week and on and on and on. But the truth is, it was joyful from day one. And which is, of course, the way things are when we invite the masters in and keep them close. And that's what happened. It happened in medicine, and I immediately, even before the first day of medical school, I found Ananda through East West Bookstore, and I've just been on this path, not a parallel path, but in fact a unified path of various ministries that have been guided by these great saints. So in that practice of medicine, and ultimately a little bit of a subspecialty with addiction medicine, and then on this spiritual path that has led me to this great work, to being one of the spiritual directors here, to doing a lot of teaching, a lot of studying, having a lot of spiritual friends. All of that has come together to this perfect moment. Of course, there are many perfect moments. Many times have I stopped and said to myself, but for this moment were you born? I'm sure many of you have, but I feel that often. And this book study is really one of them, because for all of these years, there's been that dance, and at every level, really body, mind, and soul. Because, you know, as a physician, there's a little bit of a prejudice in the medical profession against people who are seen to be just emotional, or the professional term for it, psychosomatic. I mean, there's a lot of words for it, but the feeling is the doctors don't want to have much to do with that. I've often thought everything's psychosomatic. Everything has to do with the mind and the body, and eventually, of course, I learned, and the soul. And I just never felt a distinction. It's hardly mattered to me if somebody came to see me with anxiety or with chest pain that turned out to be a heart attack. I don't care if somebody has a cough, a GI bleed, or they're feeling deep sadness or fear. I've always just felt everything as an opportunity to be engaged with another soul and to be there to help people, of course, help myself along the way. I don't really feel arrogant about this at all. You know, there's this saying, you teach best what you most need to learn. And I've been telling myself that for 30 or 40 years. So it's been a great path for me too, but nonetheless, to be in those various positions in life where whenever somebody comes to me for help, there is that perfect opportunity to take what the presenting problem, that's what it's called in medicine, is, and help people find ways to really change themselves, not so much change the problem or the situation, because when we do that, which is a lot of what I'll spend the rest of the evening talking about, when we keep trying to change that which is out there, this problem, that problem, the next problem, when we try and find ways to be happy based on what's out there, we find very quickly, everybody finds, it simply doesn't work. It cannot work. That's simply it. Because we can't solve the problems of the physical plane with a physical reality. What's out there in our lives, meaning anything other than at the very spiritual core of our being, anything other takes us away from peace, away from happiness, and into a world that even if we solve one problem, another one will have to exist soon. That's the nature of what we call duality. again, which I'm going to need to talk about. I know many of you have heard it many times. Listen with a new ear is just what I would say, because everything that we'll do for the rest of the year completely depends on us knowing, believing, embracing the notion that the way to solve every problem is to find our way back onto our spiritual path and just keep walking it. And all of the times in all of our lives that we get sidetracked, that we get called, that we get fascinated, the way we just forget and we head out to solve a problem or to satisfy a deep need, as many times as that happens, we always find that we get let down. It's not to say there aren't fun moments and joyful moments and funny moments and lovable moments in life. Of course there are. We love being with our friends. A good meal is great. Finding the perfect pair of shoes is fabulous. And we feel great when that happens. But it has a very short half-life. It doesn't last long until, just as high as we are, the next thing can happen. And in a moment, we can be saying to ourselves, I was just so thrilled last night. And now what do we say? We say we're in the pits or some such. That's what happens in life. There are waves. We're up, we're down, we're up, we're down. On the spiritual path, we don't want to be riding those waves. We want to find ourselves in the calm of the deep ocean that is really not affected very much by those waves. That's what we call a spiritual path, is when we look for that deep state of calmness, that no matter what is going on in our lives, it's not that we don't feel, we do feel. And it's not that we can't feel sad or happy. And of course, because we're human, we actually get emotional. That's why we're here, we're taking this class. How can we transform that emotional energy into devotional energy? Really, the punchline for the end of the class is, how do we transform it into the love for and of God? Because ultimately, it's in that love, not human love, not the love of our brand new house, which we can love, or our gorgeous brand new car, or, as I said before, in my case, a new pair of shoes, all perfect. But that's not what we're aiming for. We have to understand those are momentary joys. They're places to be visited, but to never let ourselves think for a moment that that's where our deep inner peace resides. Because in a heartbeat, all of that can and often is be taken away from us in one of a myriad of ways. It happens all the time. You know, I'm living through a profound experience right now. Many of you have already heard me talk about this, but my 50-year-old son-in-law, married to my partner's daughter, they have adopted our two little grandchildren, who we're very involved with, aged 9 and 10. Perfect family. The two parents at the peak of their careers, really successful, very well-known, highly sought-after people, love their family, joyful, playful. And he calls me a month ago, tells me he doesn't feel well, and within 3 days, he's diagnosed with a widely metastatic, one of the most aggressive, quickly moving tumors known. Literally, that's not hyperbole. One of, if not the fastest growing tumor. Very small number of this kind of tumor. And of course, there's no cure. There's treatment that you pray will give some months. So it's an example. Everything was perfect. She's 47, he's 50, the kids are little. Everything was perfect. And then, in their minds, totally understandably, it's not. It's not at all perfect. Of course, we could say, those of us on a spiritual path, it is perfect. It is perfect. Nothing can happen that isn't perfect, because everything is dictated by our karma. Everything, by this magnetic energy that we come in with. And we attract to ourselves exactly the perfect situations that we need every time. Not all the time, except with this aggressive cancer. All the time, except if my marriage doesn't work, or I lose a job, or. Doesn't matter. It's always perfect. On the other hand, and I really want to be clear about this, it's tragic. In this physical world, in the physical reality, in this world of shadows, dreams, all of the words that masters used for it, the Swamiji's used for it, it is tragic. It just hurts your heart. But I haven't been confused. I don't lose sight of the fact that this could only be happening were it perfect for them at a soul level, because that is always the truth. And when we start talking, which we'll do from 2 weeks on, our next class on, about emotional healing, we always have to keep in mind we're not talking about making ourselves feel better. We are talking about how is it that we go so deep inside that we begin to literally rearrange the energy in our astral spine, that we begin to draw it up in a way that we affect what we call these vortices of energy, the chakras, and we begin to do what Patanjali spoke about, and that is neutralize that energy. How do we begin to neutralize it so that it can continue its upward flow? How do we take all of those likes and dislikes? Because you see, it's not the emotion that's the problem. Emotions come with being human. We will have emotions, we'll have feelings. We have to. Not bad. It's like having an ego. Of course we have an ego. It's, as Master said, the ego is the soul identified with this body. That's what the ego is. So from the moment of inception, it's there. Is that a bad thing? We always talk about getting rid of our ego. Our ego's not a bad thing. Our ego, as Swamiji says so beautifully in his Raja Yoga course, is precisely the place from which we get this deep desire to grow spiritually. Deep desire to grow spiritually. That comes with the ego. So the ego, or this human birth, which is a treasure, it's a joy. In fact, the other thing Swamiji says in that book is that souls that have ascended to an astral plane, they were alive, they died, their soul went to the astral plane. He said many of those souls who know that they want to make quick work of moving towards enlightenment will choose to be reborn into a human body rather than staying in the astral plane. Now, from what I understand, though, I don't remember. I'm actually going to assume that I've been there before. It's pretty pleasurable up there. It's beautiful. It's transcendent from everything I've ever heard or read. But those souls choose to leave to come back, to be in the situation that we are all in, to be able to make progress. And how is it that we make progress? We make progress by working with these likes and dislikes, by our preferences. And some of them are so darn subtle. They get you before you know it. All of a sudden you find yourself acting in ways, behaving in ways, treating people in a certain way. And I imagine it happens to other people. It certainly happens to me. I'm saying to myself, where did that come from? Well, honey, it's just sitting in one of your little vrittis there, and it's doing its job, which is trying to seduce you back out into the world of likes and dislikes, of needs, of desires out there, which inevitably leads to feeling one of these 20-some feelings. There aren't 30, only because Swamiji gives more than a day to some of them. But that's what happens. So what we're going to do, which is, I'm so excited about it, and I hope all of you can be excited with me, is that we are going to take a journey that will show us if we're serious. Or let me put it in another way, which is more compassionate, even for myself. We're all serious. We wouldn't even be here tonight if we weren't serious about this spiritual path. But to whatever degree we can find the courage, the energy, the willpower, the willingness in this life to do that hard work, because it is hard. Just as we're looking for magnetism, we're always looking to increase our magnetism by raising our energy and moving closer and closer to the Guru. That's what we're trying to do. But make no mistake about it, there's a lot of magnetism for us out in this world. We're not simply doing this. We are pulled out. All of us, we wouldn't even be in a human body if we weren't. And again, I'm not being critical of that. I'm saying that is grist for our mills. That is the stuff that we can work with. It's not the emotion that's bad. It's, do we let it become emotional? Do we allow that emotional energy to simply be reactive, unthought out? Or are we trying to learn to draw the energy in and sit with it and calm it? There really is a calming to it. And then use it to raise it up and transform that very energy. Because energy is neither good nor bad. It's simply what we do with it. And with a certain degree of consciousness, with a certain degree of willfulness, we can always transform it. That's the nature of energy. And one finds, and again, I'm certain that people know this, anybody who would choose to take this class, that you can be near a person who used to drive you crazy. You didn't even know why, but they just did. You didn't want to be near them. Or even with our partners, where we can be so reactive at times, or we could just go on and on. These things happen. A boss that we think, I can't work with that person, and they're always picking on me, and all of which may be true. And yet, how many times have we found that when we make the conscious decision to make a change within ourselves, suddenly that person who was one of the more annoying people in our world not that long ago, suddenly we find our hearts opening. And if you haven't had that experience, I highly recommend it. It's such a lovely feeling, experience, knowing, when we say to ourselves, we can never really change anything outside of ourselves, nor should we want to, which is another interesting point about this course. It is, it's the second yama. Let me just think. I'm trying to think. So it's nonviolence and non-lying. It's the second yama. Patanjali was saying, you want to find spiritual freedom, don't expect things to be different than how they are. And that's what this is about. This is how things are. What can we change? Or what Sister Gyanamata said, don't change my circumstances, Lord, change me. Meaning, let me move through the world practicing inner peace, inner calmness, heart wide open, seeing God everywhere, in everyone and everything. And right now, and I know this, those can just sound like words. We could all say, boy, am I far from that. But we begin, maybe by taking this course, by going through week after week after week of just bringing in these spiritual practices. And then at the end of 10 months, we suddenly notice that we're very different than we were. We've brought our attention and our awareness to this elevated place. We've been thinking about the lessons that we'll learn here. We've been meditating on them. We've been really desirous. We've taken that desire that was out in the world and we've brought it in and we've focused it on one desire, which is to really genuinely know God, to have that experience of living in the divine. And that happens when we quit wanting situations to be other than what they are. And many other lessons, but this is certainly a good one, because we begin to see God everywhere. And what does that really mean, see God? It means that we begin to feel our hearts open. We begin to feel any one or all of those 8 attributes. We actually really feel love that is greater than we are. We have an experience that we know is transcendent, that we know it's divine, because we, children of this world, could not love by our own powers. That's why this song popped into my head in the middle of this week. It just says it. But suddenly, we're there. Suddenly, we feel peaceful. How does Master say it? Amidst crashing waves, is that right? It's something like that. And we do. And we're shocked. We're even shocked. And then we can say to ourselves, that's God's presence. That's God's presence in the midst of a situation where I would have felt fearful, or I would have been angry, or I would have been doubting myself, or I would have gotten so anxious or fearful, any of those. And then that moment happens where for a moment you don't feel that, because you have cooperated with grace, and grace has descended, and you're open to God's love. And the way that we get there is by working with all of these feelings that are so hard for us now. It's sort of like that saying, are you walking the dog or is the dog walking you? And it's pretty apt here, because it's so easy. You know, I'll tell you, this is true, embarrassing but true. Just this morning, I did one of those things again. My God, I've told stories about this so many times. But I wanted something that wasn't happening. And so I wrote an email to a whole bunch of people. It was like, make it be so. Even as I was saying to myself, you're too emotional. There's something involved here. It's not pure. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this. Do it. Now, I told a story like that 3 months ago or something. 3 months ago, I did it. I'm doing it again. Yeah, these are the subtleties. And I have come to believe that the more time we spend on a path, the further down the path we get, or up the path. But we're all on the same path. But the longer, the more, the harder we're working, I think the tests get a little more subtle and a little more difficult. So what? So what? Within 2 minutes, I said to myself, oh, that was a mistake. And I just wrote the next email and undid it. And I didn't want to linger there all day. I don't want to beat myself up. That would be the next self-involved thing to do. But I do want to notice it. Sometimes I think when I tell stories of myself, just a way of highlighting it, noticing it. You're telling the whole world that story, Shanti. Try not to do it again. It just feels that way. But we all do that. I know it because it's the nature of who we are, and I'm saying it so that what we feel is not self-doubt, not self-criticism. We don't get abusive with ourselves. We just simply notice, like we do in meditation when our mind wanders. Do you ever try and have a fight with your mind and win? It doesn't work. It simply will not work if you don't just let that moment go and come back to center. And the same thing with everything here. And that is really what we'll be doing. We'll be walking this spiritual path, one emotion at a time, always lifting it up by this thread of a deep desire. The thread will be that deep desire to grow spiritually and to find that day when we can feel that calmness without making the effort in the moment. That the practice has been such that the waters have been calmed, the heart is open, our attention has been focused here enough that we just stay on this journey. The journey doesn't necessarily get easier. I'm telling you this story about my son and daughter-in-law. And I go down there for almost 4 or 5 days every other week. I'm right in the middle of it. That's not easy. It's not easy watching all of these people in pain and trying to be with each one of them, and a 9 and a 10-year-old who are terrified and have no idea what's going on. Plus, I've become the chief cook and bottle washer and many, many other roles. It's challenging. It's challenging. And yet, I meditate every morning, and I just find myself, I say always, by the grace of God, just moving through it. Life doesn't change. Then every once in a while we hit send on an email where we shouldn't, and we come back. Or I come home from a trip like that and yell at my husband. These things happen. I'm not standing in front of you saying, I've done all this. I'm over it now. Of course not. But there is, as I said in a talk I gave on this subject a few weeks ago, a line in Swamiji's song, The Hill That Was Tara, that says, every effort we spend gives more life in the end, till our gladness in life's ever new. And what is he saying there? He's saying it takes effort, but with every bit of effort that we're willing to put out to do this, we move closer and closer to that state of superconsciousness, where, as Master said, ever new joy, till our gladness in life's ever new. There's a very deep meaning to that line, and that is the journey that we've just stepped on and where we are headed. Now, let me stop for a moment and do a few little details. I should have done these in the beginning, but I want to do it now. We are going to keep people muted here from our end until the last, 10 minutes of every class, when I'm happy to open it up for questions. As the email that you received said, you can also send me questions at shanti@anandapaloalto.org, and I will try and address them in the next class if it works. So that's one thing I want to say. We can open for questions. Please feel free to send in questions if you have them now or anytime during the next 2 weeks. I won't answer them by email, probably, because the good news is there's a lot of you, but I'll do my best in the classes. The other thing I wanted to say, and this is a little tricky, but I want to say it. Many people think that if they walk onto a spiritual path, they can quit working on themselves, both emotionally and even when it's more significant, I'm going to use the word psychiatrically. So people think, I'll just get on the path, I'll start trying to live by these principles, and all of that will go away. That doesn't happen. That is not what happens. I had, for many years, the third largest practice, internal medicine practice, in the United States. That's big, big. The numbers wouldn't mean anything to most of you. But all by way of saying, I saw a lot of people over a lot of years. And I don't really know what the percentage is, but I referred a lot of people to psychotherapists, and certainly a lesser number of people, but some people to psychiatrists. Because as I said to you 50 minutes ago, I don't care what the problem is. If you're somebody who has serious depression, serious biochemical depression, and you need meds, hey, take the meds. I always tell people, leave those medicines on your altar. Say a prayer. Ask Master to come to you through those medicines. Of course, I say that about high blood pressure and asthma and everything else because people always come to me thinking I hate medicines. I love medicines when they're right. I love whatever is right for each individual person. How could anything be good or bad? It's all God. It's all a manifestation of pure divine energy. I just had a badly abscessed tooth, and for 5 weeks I was on antibiotics. Those antibiotics lived on my altar, and every time I went to get one, I'd say, I know you're in there, Master. I know you're there. Come on, heal me. That's what I did. I just recognized the divinity in everything. So we cannot walk onto a spiritual path if we're having serious emotional problems to be defined by you and your healthcare person or whoever you're trusting, but serious emotional and certainly psychiatric problems. If people have, for instance, any psychotic disorder, bipolar disease, schizophrenia, there's nothing wrong with it. It's no better or worse than having a heart attack or high blood pressure or not. But we have to be realistic about how we treat it. And I'm saying that because it's easy to be fooled in a course like this and think we're going to talk every week about the spiritual antidote, and we are, to each of these feelings. And that's what it's like. It is exactly like an antidote. But we have to be honest. Self-honesty, another one of the yamas. We have to. We have to say to ourselves, I can move down a spiritual path, but do I also need to be seeing a therapist? Do I need to be on medicines? You have to have, one has to have a solid ego, very solid ego, before you can leave it. The goal on this path is definitely to move from ego consciousness to soul consciousness. But you can't walk away from something that you can't feel, see, know. People who are really settled in themselves, who have worked through a lot of whatever, childhood issues, past life issues. You know, my mother didn't treat me well. She didn't believe in me, so I've never been really self-confident. I mean, which was my case for decades. But many, many things, if we don't work with that, I'm not saying through it because I'm not sure we ever get through it in a lifetime, to be honest, but if we're not working with it, if we don't find that inner strength, it's not the best thing to be diving deep onto a path thinking that you get to not do that work. So each person is an individual, and the answers are very individual, but I want to say it because, again, people come to these classes for different reasons, and we need to be clear. Of course, everybody can stay here, but ask yourself these questions, and if there's anything hiding in the closet there, email me about it. In that case, I could speak with you individually, and we could talk. But just know we need strong egos. We need to be somewhat centered for these spiritual teachings, for us to be able to work with the teaching and not just have it take us somewhere that isn't healthy. I hope I'm saying that well. It's a complicated thing to say to a whole bunch of people, but I needed to say that. So let me just ask, are there any questions, Sai Ganesh?
You can open it up.
Yeah, if anybody has a question that they want to write in the chat box right now, you can do that. It's actually 8 o'clock, but we can take a couple of minutes. Or as I said, feel free to send me questions. We can end now. If there are no questions, we'll just end. Again, this was an introduction to the course. And next week we'll start, I almost switched the order of the book, but then in a moment of wisdom, I said, Swamiji must have had a reason for doing what he did. So the first week is about anger, which of course is a very, it's an issue for many of us. So it's probably a good place to start, but it felt a little big. So I'm just watching Sai Ganesh for 1 minute. Somebody's typing. We'll take one question and then we'll end.
You have to repeat the question because I'm not.
Okay?
What does emotional healing mean?
What does emotional healing mean? Emotional healing means taking our emotions from an emotional place, an outward reactive emotional place, and learning how to take that same energy and turn it into devotional energy. And devotional energy means energy that's moving in the direction of soul consciousness, away from ego consciousness and toward soul consciousness, God consciousness, super consciousness. So it's a directional healing is what it is. Okay, let's end with a prayer, and I hope to see all of you in 2 weeks. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, saints of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. Thank you for your presence in our lives. Help us to attune ourselves always, ever more perfectly, to your divine presence within. We are your children, longing to come home. Please show us the way. Om, peace. Amen.